Hello, friends, and welcome back to Malicious Compliance Stories. Let's start our video with a story in which an awful boss threatened to fire our OP for following his direct orders and got fired himself for disobeying his own order. But before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel if you're new here and turn on notifications so you don't miss a new video every single day. Here we go. Follow the flag code to the letter or you'll be fired. This happened about 10 years ago. I was struggling to figure out where my life was headed, what I wanted to do for a career, typical existential crisis stuff. I quit my job in the auto industry to feel out a few other career paths. I landed on security guard for an industrial complex in the middle of Georgia. Big company in a small town. Pay was great, it was night shift, so it worked well with my non-existent sleep schedule, and it was an interesting change from what I've done most of my life. I loved it at first, until my boss changed his shift to overlap with mine in the morning. The dude was nuts. He had delusions of grandeur. He was a pathological liar, frequently made up stories about being in the Navy SEALs with Steven Seagal. He was a quartermaster in the Navy for 4 years before he filed a disability claim after he knocked over a storage rack and it fell on him. One of his biggest pet peeves was the massive flag the company had. He printed out a few dozen copies of the flag code and told us to follow it to the letter, including putting it up and down every morning and night. Being night shift, I was almost always the person putting it up. One morning, there was extremely bad weather, and per the flag code, I didn't put the flag up. My boss came in about an hour later and ran his first rounds and noticed the flag wasn't displayed. I pointed at the specific section of the flag code that says not to display it during inclement weather, and he absolutely lost his mind, berated me for 30 minutes. When it was time to clock out, he was still berating me, but I just stood up, clocked out, and left our little shack. The next day, I show up and he tells me I'm suspended. Cool, I get a night off. I come back 2 days later and the district manager is there with my boss. We sit down and chat. My boss keeps interrupting me and insulting me, so I told the district manager that I'm leaving if my boss doesn't let me speak. The DM takes me elsewhere to finish the convo. I explained everything that happened, showed him the flag code, showed him the weather that morning, and told him about my boss threatening to fire me if I didn't follow the flag code, then berating me for 30 minutes for following the flag code. The district manager and I walk into the security shack and sit down with my boss. The district manager proceeded to tell my boss that he's being fired for harassment and for violating his own flag code policy. I ultimately left a week later because I found a better job elsewhere, but it was one of the most satisfying things I've ever experienced. And our second story. Manager screwed me over, so I got him fired. So my first job when I was out of college was door-to-door salesman. The manager made it seem like an easy job and the commission pay was incredible. I stupidly took the job, which meant I could no longer claim job seeker's allowance. My first day there, I met the manager's girlfriend. She was also a manager, and there was some other kid there. We were given our contracts. They were at least 50 pages long. I've never seen a work contract before, so I didn't think much of it and read it over quickly. Everyone in the room was laughing at me because I was reading it. I always like to at least proofread before I sign anything. They wanted me to hurry up and sign so we could get going on our first pitch. We split into 2 groups and went door to door while I learned the sales technique. After about a week, I was allowed to go door to door myself. As expected, a lot of people weren't interested. They hate door-to-door sales, and I hated doing it. The manager's girlfriend would always be driving, and she was a really dangerous driver, always swerving, braking too hard, driving really fast. What was worse was she was drinking and driving. She'd pour a bottle of wine into a water bottle and drink to make it look like it was fruit juice. She could easily go through 4 bottles in a day, and when she got too drunk, her boyfriend, my manager, would drive instead, and he was even worse. I was terrified for my life. I left my location, switched on my phone so my friends could track me down if there was an accident. I put up with it because my mom was nagging me about getting a job and earning money because she wanted rent. I rarely got interest in a sale, and when I did, my manager would swoop in and steal my pitch, assuring me I'd get the commission for it. I never did. About 6 weeks in and receiving a weekly paycheck of £5, it was minimum in my contract, so I couldn't argue that I was working and not being paid, and never seeing the commission I was earning, he stole about £3,000 of my hard-earned commission. He also failed to pick up his phone, reply to texts, and even show up for work. That was it. I knew where we were planning to be pitching sales for the next 2 weeks, so I decided to get my revenge. I went into the showroom every day to hand in my ID and paperwork. I then took a walk down to the police station to give a statement. I knew everything. I gave their full names, birthdays, even address, the car registration, the drunk driving, what they'd done in regards to stealing my pay, and where they'd be pitching for the next 2 weeks. I even gave a map and times of where we were so they could go get street surveillance of the drunk driving. The police had enough to be getting on with and passed the information off to a team to deal with it. I put in a claim for job seekers allowance again and started looking for a new job. 2 weeks later, I went past the showroom and there was a big sign advertising they're hiring for a new manager. That sign was up for the next 12 months before the place was shut down. I don't know exactly what happened to my manager and his girlfriend, but last I heard, she was serving time and lost her license. As for my manager, I heard through a friend he was back living with his mom. Turned out the contract they made us sign was watertight to get up to work without pay and make sure they weren't liable if anyone was hurt while working. Incredibly illegal, but no one caught on because nobody wanted to read 50 pages of fine print. Coworker Revenge. I worked for a great company that I really liked. I'm a nice person and get along with almost everybody except Murray. I don't know to this day what it was about him, but we just didn't like each other. I was mature about it and would still work with him regardless of any personal feelings. I was up for a promotion and it was really only between me and another guy. This guy was very good friends with Murray. When I didn't get it, another friend told me that Murray had personally went to the hiring manager and badmouthed me and likely cost me the job. The revenge. I played the long game on this one. Murray's a bit of an alcoholic and would brag about knowing how to drive home, avoiding check stops and getting pulled over. We had a big staff party, and of course he gets really drunk. I stayed until he was leaving and called the cops, gave his plate number and where to find him. He got caught, lost his license, and since he lived out of town, almost couldn't get to work. Since he was leaving a work event, his manager got in hot water for letting it happen. His manager knew what he did to me and did nothing, and he got crap from his manager for it too. It almost cost him his job. He got a fine and lost his license, all that for effing with my career. Revenge is sweeter when you play the long game. And our last story. Bad advice cost neighbor most of his yard and a car. Gramps had just moved into a retirement park with a lot that backed up to county land that was a nature preserve. His backyard was basically non-existent, but he didn't mind as he got to look out over the preserve. However, he did marvel at how his next-door neighbor's backyard extended a good 8 feet past his, giving neighbor a nice space back there. Gramps tried to be friendly with all his new neighbors, exchanging phone numbers and the like, and one day he noticed the next-door neighbor was putting down expensive pavers that extended from his back door all the way to the old fence post that designated the preserve boundary. Gramps watched the neighbor yank the 3 rickety fence posts out of the ground and move them back an extra 2 feet into the preserve before pounding them back in, then starting to clear the land, intending to gain himself more area for his pavers. Gramps used to work for the National Park Service as a young lad, so he thought he'd better warn his neighbor of the consequences of his actions, so he heads out back for a little chat. Neighbor's immediately defensive, and before Gramps says much, neighbor tells him, "You're new here. I've been here 10 years, and to mind your own damn business." Gramps decides not to press the issue. Nothing happens that year, but the following year, when most of the park emptied out to head north for the summer, the county comes by to check on their preserve. Gramps notices them going back and forth behind his neighbor's house. The workers are pulling out maps and taking photos and making phone calls, and soon more guys show up. Turns out the neighbor has moved the post several times over the years, and in reality, his backyard is supposed to even be smaller than Gramps' backyard. To make it worse, the neighbor put pavers in the back specifically to park both his golf cart and a cherry red sports car back there for the summer. So the county will have to move them before they can do anything else. They tape a notice to the front door and leave. Gramps goes over to read it. It states that neighbor was in violation of encroaching onto a protected lands. He has 30 days to remove his car, tear up the pavers, and pay a fine of $11,000 because of damage to endangered species who inhabit the protected lands, as well as trespassing fees. Failure to do so within 30 days will result in golf cart and car being towed and impounded, pavers will be dug up and carted off at neighbor's expense, and the fine will increase for every additional day past that deadline. 30 days comes and goes, so a week after that, Gramps has quite the show, as first the car and cart were towed, pavers were dug up and hauled off, and the old fence posts and ropes were replaced with metal posts embedded into buried cement bases, connected by steel cables. The whole process took several weeks to finish, but the preserve looked a lot more legit when they were done. A few solar cameras were installed so the county could monitor the wildlife and encroachers remotely. Meanwhile, more notices were taped to the front door of neighbor's house. By November, the snowbirds were flooding back into the park, including Neighbor. That was Gramps' second show of the summer, as Neighbor reads all the notices, digging down until he reads the first one, then runs back out and starts screaming and cussing up a storm before running back to his car to dig out his cell phone so he can call the county to find out where his car and golf cart were. Gramps stays indoors to avoid the guy as he's frantically trying to unload his car, turn on his water and electricity, get the AC and toilets going, and all the while trying to get someone at county to pick up the phone and give him some answers. He finally gets a live person and proceeds to scream at them while on speakerphone about his car and cart, so the call keeps getting kicked to other people because who wants to help a screamer? Basically, Neighbor is told to come to the county office to get this straightened out. 3 days later, Neighbor catches Gramps outside and asks if he was here when the county stole his car and destroyed his backyard. Gramps says he was, and Neighbor says, "Well, why didn't you call me when you saw them putting notices on my door? You had my number up north." Gramps said he had thought about doing that, but figured the neighbor would prefer him to mind his own damn business, so he decided against it. Never underestimate old people. You never know what skills and knowledge they had when they were younger that can and will totally F you. Hey guys, thank you all for watching this. I'll see you in the next one.